Hey everybody, it's Wargamer Shawn. This has been a long time coming, especially I'm ashamed because the Orks were my second army I ever collected, and I still really love them to this day, and I haven't gotten around to doing their Codex review yet, and I apologize. Just life has a way of catching up with you sometimes. So I'm going to I'll probably break it down because my 7th edition review I think was a little too long, and I think most people probably didn't even have the stomach to get through it all. I'm just going to break this down into different parts. I'm going to first talk about the game itself, or the Codex itself. We don't know who it's written by. Once again, it's probably a team of people. I don't think this Codex has the same as Phil Kelly's last one from 4th edition, in that Codex, even though it was pretty aged, and yes, it was a lot less and less competitive as time went on, it lasted a long time and remained competitive for a long time through many codexes, but also many editions of the game. Basically 4th through the beginning of 7th. I don't know. We'll see if this one has the ability to do that. I think some of the randomness is gone, which to some degree was kind of good, because you never knew when you took Orks. I mean, it was fun, but for a competitive nature, it was kind of like, well, what's going to happen to me today? Whereas a lot of other armies didn't have that. But some things I think it kind of took away. It had a huge customability to it that I think this edition lacks a little bit of. And I think the way the rules work and the mob rule, which we'll talk about, changed. I think it almost has to change how we play. The old adage was always, well, not always, but since about 4th edition, it was always kind of boys before toys, meaning you always wanted to take more Orks versus loading them up or making them have heavy armor, that sort of thing. And I think now as we go through this, you'll kind of look at it and go, well, maybe now it's toys before boys. I mean, to some extent, just because of the mob rule, I think it kind of changes your tactics on what you're going to use your boys, for. In my opinion, you may not agree with that. So the beginning of the book kind of talks about the Fluff. They reintroduce some of the glyphs again. Now, some of them are the same actually as what they were in 2nd edition when they introduced them in the Ork Codex. Although some of them they got rid of. They used to have a little beaky, it was called beaky, and that's what stood for Space Marines, because back in 2nd edition all the Space Marines had the armor that had the beaky nose, so they were called beakies. And then they had one where it had a pointy hat, and those were called pansies, P-A-N-Z-E-E. Z-E-E, yeah, 2 E's, and those refer to Eldar. That term isn't very PC anymore, so they left those two out for obvious reasons. One is that Space Marines don't wear beaky helmets much anymore, although I'll always think of them, and I always try to model my guys like that because that's what I was used to seeing when we first started playing the game. But everything else is pretty much in there like it was, which is cool. It's colored now and it wasn't before. They kind of go into some of the history as far as the clans and tribes, which is kind of cool because 4th edition Codex really didn't do that. And in 2nd edition, and even Rogue Trader, when some of the stuff was in the White Dwarf when it originally came out, they really developed the fluff and the history of the Orks. Although they've changed, because back then they used to reproduce like humans did with sexual reproduction. Now they are spores and funguses, so the fluff's changed a little bit, but they put a lot of the stuff back in as far as the clans go, which is pretty cool. Of course, anything that didn't have models for kind of went away. So unfortunately, some of us that have made things for Wazdaka and some of the other basically HQs that didn't have models are gone now. But it goes through a lot of the history, talks about Gazgul, the Green Tide, and then there's a lot of pictures. Now the Codex changed this time because It used to be that it would go through kind of the abilities and kind of fluff of each of the units in the group, and then they would have at the end an army listing, and you choose points and stuff like that. Now they have an Orc Wargear list right away, and then they go right into the basically the units, and it has a little description about them, a colored picture of them, which is different than the other codexes, and then it actually has their war gear and stuff, and then later on in the book it actually has descriptions on what each of the war gear items does. So that's a little different than before. I guess, you know, we'll try to do probably a different one that goes through the different you know, the HQs and that sort of thing. But I guess for this one, I kind of wanted to go through some of the history and stuff. We will also do a talk through on Wog Gazgal and the Red Wog, probably maybe together, because it's mainly a, well, we'll see. But there's a lot of changes that have happened, and so I think the big thing, let's talk about some of the main changes. So the Orc special rules. Ere We Go used to be a psychic power that Weird Boy or Warpied could get, which was a teleporting one. Now they've changed that. That one's got a different name now. It's I can't remember it right off the top of my head. I apologize, but the Ere We Go rule now is that every unit that has models that have the Ere We Go special rule, which is all the orcs, they can re-roll a single dice when they're determining a charge range. So that's excuse me, that's nice. It's a little better to help get them into close combat. Something I wish that the almost the Nids would have gotten, but I think it's cool that they gave it to the orcs. I think it's good. So I think that'll help them get into close combat. It's kind of like an almost fleet. It's kind of nice. The mob rule, I'm not really happy with the change. It used to be the mob rule, if you had 10 or more boys, they were fearless. The mob rule now is different. Now you still have to make morale and pinning checks, which unfortunately most of your boys and knobs are going to be leadership 7. So it's not that great. I guess a little bit better than like a Tau Fire Warrior. So if you basically roll your leadership and you fail, you have to roll on a mob rule chart. Now the boss poll doesn't allow you to re-roll your leadership test like you used to. Now you can re-roll the result on the d6 dice. That's all it does. Some degrees that's good, some degrees it's, you know, not as good as it used to be. On the d6 roll, if you roll a 1, if the unit's locked in combat, it's treated as if it passes morale or pinning check, it stays locked in combat. That's the one you want when you're in close combat, and that's where it's good to kind of have a boss bowl. 2 to 3, you're breaking heads. If you have independent characters or characters, the unit suffers d6 strength 4 AP dash hits, treated as if it's passes morale test and pinning check. So the bad thing is that if you have your normal boys with just 6 up armor, you're going to be d6, let's say average of 3, you're going to wound half the time. Let's just say 1 to 2, you're going to lose 1 to... Okay, so the number 4 through 6 on the mob rule, if you roll a 4 through 6, if a unit is 10 or more models, it suffers d6 strength 4 hits, and then it's treated as if passing. If it's below 10, then they fail their morale check or pinning check. So 4 to 6 isn't so good. I don't know, you know, sometimes I used to think it wasn't worth the boss poll, but I think sometimes having the lower ones is actually better, so I don't know. If you had the points, I guess maybe, although most of the time your war boss is probably going to come with one, for that unit at least. So the Warlord traits, let's go through those quick. So Prophet of the Wog, so basically, if you gain the Wog rule, and not everything comes with so not all Orc forces automatically get a free Wog like they used to. You have to have a Warlord that has the Wog ability. But if you don't have one, let's say you bring a big mech, and you roll on the chart, you roll a 1, you get a free Wog. If you already have a Wog, then your Warlord has that rule, but it also has effects where they get the Fearless rule for when he calls the Wog until the start of the next turn, which is cool. And the Wog is different this time. Now with the Wog, you're able to run and charge the same turn that you run in. So it's kind of like the old fleet. So that's what the Wog does this now. Number 2 on the chart is Bellowing Tyrant. The Warlord and all friendly units with the Orcs faction within 12 inches of him reroll failed morale checks and pinning checks. That's nice. Like a Thunderbolt. Number 3, the Warlord and all friendly units within 12 inches reroll all dice when determining run moves or charge moves. That's nice too. Brutal but Cunning. The Warlord can reroll 1 failed to hit or to wound roll each turn. That's very nice. Cunning but Brutal. The Warlord can reroll 1 failed armor or invulnerable save each throw. And then Might is Right. The Warlord receives +1 strength characteristics on his profile. I mean, most of the time your war boss is going to have a power claw, right? So you can't go above 10, and he's already strength 5. So, I mean, I guess maybe if you get you know, something else, it might benefit it. For the most part, I don't know. You know, I guess maybe if it's on a bike and you have a Hammer of Wrath, or you take the formation, it allows you to, if you roll 10 or more, have a Hammer of Wrath attack. It might be worth it because your base strength is, you know, +1 more, so you'd be base strength 6. It just isn't that great. I mean, to me, like the Prophet of the Wog, if you already have a Wog, or WoW. You know, the other ones, I mean, you know, 4 and 5, Brutal but Cunning and Cunning but Brutal, are okay. I just, you know, honestly, if I was rolling on this trait and I didn't have a Warlord trait, I probably would roll on Strategic, because there's some pretty nice things on the Strategic main rulebook page. Although one of the, and we'll get to one of the things, the special, you know, basically war gear that you can get does allow you to have a free roll on the strategic trait. So I think we'll stop. I think I'll stop here, and I apologize. My battery keeps dying on this thing. I think we will stop here and pick up on like melee weapons and stuff on the next one. You know, my overall impressions is you try to remain positive. I think when you get a new codex, you always expect that it's going to become fantastic or really awesome or the next broken thing. I don't think that's the case, although, you know, I think sometimes with a new edition, you know, I saw it with Chaos Space Marines, and even Dark Angels, but I think sometimes when they come out with a new edition, the first, you know, 1 or 2 codexes tend to be a little bit more tame, just to basically try to be conservative with the new edition. And I would actually be fine with that if all the codexes kind of held up that way. And also, both 6th and 7th edition kind of favors shooting, which unfortunately that's not the way the orcs are, so certain armies are going to be more powerful, you know, like Eldar, Tau, and Space Marines. So I think, unfortunately, you know, it's going to be a little, you know, they have a little bit more to try to make up to do this. But I think, you know, the Here We Go rule is going to help them with charging. I'm not super happy about the mob rule. You know, it's not a deal breaker, but I do think it does change how you build your, you know, how you build your orcs. You may not go for the boys, you know, before toys. You might rethink that. We'll get into that further. The next one we'll kind of go through the different basically equipment and go from there. This is Wargamer Shawn. Talk to you later.
Goodbye. 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 Bye-bye. Goodbye. See ya. Bye for now. Bye for now. Goodbye. I like bottoms.